My first question is that one. The first one is how do you see the try to introduce these ISIS members, like ISIS members, because they are like mercenaries, going like beasts, killing people all around the country.
Yes, this is obvious from the footage that comes out. The Western media doesn't show the footage because it ruins their narrative.
Yeah.
And they don't even tell their audiences that the former head of the CIA, Pompeo, he also said that Mossad is among the rioters. And Mossad itself put out a Persian statement saying that they are among the rioters. And Channel 14 of the Israeli regime did a program and stated that a foreign country or foreign countries brought in weapons so that hundreds of police officers and security people could be murdered. So they are all admitting that they were deeply involved. The footage shows that these people were murdering police officers, they were murdering ordinary people on the streets, they were destroying buses, ambulances, fire engines. Why were they burning fire engines? Because they wanted the fires that they created to get worse. They destroyed an entire market in the city of Rasht in northern Iran. They destroyed many banks. They destroyed private and public property. They destroyed around 250 educational centers, many mosques. So it's clear what they were up to. They were out to create chaos, murder and destruction to justify war. This was all about war. But Western media will not show any of this. They'll just say these are peaceful protesters and that the government is killing them. But the reality is that on Monday you probably saw the huge crowds across the country. In Tehran there were between 2.3 to 3 million people participating in the pro-Islamic Republic rally, which was very difficult to get to. It took me 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get back. And imagine many people who attended, they are working class, they are people who are struggling to put food on the table, but they decided to spend half a day going there and coming back because they wanted to make a political statement. So,
and in many cities around the country, because I was in Isfahan and I was inside one of them. Salam.
تشکر خانم. خیلی ممنون. So, yes, these rallies, the one in Tehran was between 2.3 to 3 million people. And these rallies took place across the country. And because every city had its own rally. And the whole country was outraged. Wherever there were riots, the rallies were bigger. The worse the riots, the bigger the anti-riot rallies were. And it was all shown live on many TV channels. But Western media tried to ignore it. They did rolling coverage. That day, you had RT there, you had Al Mayadeen there, Al Jazeera, CCTV, CGTN, Turkish. There are many people there.
And they
in Tehran, this was just
the victims. At the same time, they say that it's the regime, it's that the regime
yes,
that are killing people, not the opposite.
In fact, in Western media, they often showed images of these big rallies to pretend that these are the opponents and these are the rioters. Another thing that I think is important for people to know is that the protests did exist on the first couple of days, and there were no arrests, there was no police harassment. What happened was that the Americans manipulated the currency in the Emirates.
Well, then, sorry, you were talking about...
Yeah, so what happened was initially the United States manipulated the currency by putting pressure on the Emirates or in coordination with Emirates, and in Kurdish Iraq, because Kurdish Iraq, Emirates, these are allies of Israel and the United States.
Like in Syria?
Yes, and then also in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
they put pressure there. So the currency fell, and then we had some protests. They weren't but they weren't very large, maybe a couple thousand. They were basically shop owners and business people who were worried about the currency. The government said they're right, they have a right to be worried. And nothing happened. And the second day they again protested and nothing happened. It was when these highly trained groups infiltrated the protests, and then suddenly starting, because the protests were only in Tehran and in a few other places, initially one or two other places, but then these rioters began to become active in many different places across the country. They were highly trained, they were very violent, they destroyed huge amounts of property and killed many people.
Yes.
Including many ordinary people who are just walking down the street, and even protesters. So, for example, surgeons who were operating said that many of the people who were injured, they had bullet wounds in the back, or small, or most of them were killed or injured with pistols from very close range. And this, of course, means that they were shooting from within the crowd. Often they would shoot among ordinary people, whether just ordinary people or people who were protesting, at the police. Why? Because they wanted ordinary people to get killed. The objective was to create chaos in the country, to create division, and then you had hundreds of media outlets in Persian in the West that are funded by Western intelligence, trying to create fear and division and hatred and misinformation so that there would be chaos. Why did they want to do this? So they used the currency, then they used these pre-trained groups of rioters and terrorists to make the case for war. And we saw how suddenly Western media, from the Democrats to the Republicans, and in Europe everyone was suddenly saying we have to help the Iranians. Whereas this chaos, these murders were being carried out because of Western intelligence agencies. And if they really cared about Iranians, they would say end the sanctions instead of talking about bombing the country, killing people to save people. This, of course, is all because Western mainstream media is owned by the oligarchs and the neocons and the Zionists, and all of them have similar worldviews. So,
well, the agenda is written, I think, by the empire, and the empire is in a global front of war, and I think they were intended to not only this time to provoke a slow war inside the country, but I think they pretend to coordinate with an attack, maybe a Zionist attack, maybe including NATO attack, because they are using NATO now to go ahead with everything in Ukraine and here. And I ask you this, they failed because they stopped.
And another very interesting thing was that at the height of the violence, when they were killing so many people, these terrorists and these professional rioters and trained rioters, the Iranians cut off the internet. And as soon as they did that, the violence began to die down very fast. Why? Because they were all being coordinated from outside. Outside, Western intelligence agencies, their bosses, they were telling them where to go, what to do. So, for example, if the police were on this side of the city, suddenly these groups would go to the other side of the city. And because they're different groups, there are the MEK terrorist organization,
yes,
which is a cult. There's remnants of ISIS. There's the Takfiri Wahhabi groups in in Baluchistan, the Baluchistan province. They are the Kurdish terrorist groups and separatists, and they're the monarchists. And they all hate each other. But they were all coordinating with each other through their bosses in the intelligence agency. So when this was cut, suddenly it all fell apart.
But they use also Starlink.
Yes, but they didn't think Iran was going to cut the internet. So Starlink was for some of their needs, but not for all of their needs.
Yeah.
So when Iran cut the internet, most of the coordination collapsed. So this was obviously not spontaneous. If it was spontaneous, then cutting the internet doesn't have an effect. It was well coordinated. Then they were still using Starlink, but Iran was able to hack this system.
Yeah.
I don't know much about these issues, but in any case, that made it even worse for them. And the whole thing collapsed. And as you know, over the past, since last Saturday, so today is Monday, for 9 days the country is quiet. And you are in a hotel, you go outside, you go out at night, you go out at midnight, you can go to a sandwich shop, you can go to a restaurant, you can walk on the streets, you can take a taxi.
Yes, I go by my tube station every day. I go to visit the Sadi Tower, to Milad Tower also, to restaurants in the mountain. I've been doing that all these days, including since up to the third day. But in the first and second day there was rise, but nobody knows. The internet cut off, and only one day after I was in the street.
Yeah, so but what they are saying in the Western media is that people are being killed every day.
Yeah.
They're saying that every day they're killing people and people are dying and there are riots. And a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday, we're saying they're using chemical weapons. So in a few days, maybe they'll be saying they're using nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So
by the way, here when I was in the YouTube, this city that I don't know how much people, maybe more than 10 million, maybe more than 15 million people here in this city. When you go to that size city in the Western countries, it's all stress. You can imagine they are stressed for something. Here there were no stress at all.
Because people in Iran, they do not believe in these rioters. They do not support them. And the people who came to the streets in Tehran, as you pointed out, Tehran is about, 10 million. And then during the day, it's about maybe 13, 14 million, because people come from other cities to work. In this huge city, most people never saw any riots, because the rioters would go to some neighborhoods. But if I didn't live in that neighborhood, in that street, I wouldn't see the riots. So people think, in the West, they're trying to say that everyone is up in arms, and no, most people are driving around, even while the riot was taking place, let's say in this neighborhood, in this part of the city. In the rest of the city, people were going around doing their business, seeing relatives. You were here, so you know what I mean, but I'm just saying this for your audience.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, so the point is that Western media is not independent. It is linked to the very same powers that control foreign policy, that strengthen the oligarchs, and they are the neocons, they are the Zionists, they're all one and the same.
And they are trying to penetrate in the minds of the local, not only the target of the media, the communicational guerrilla of the imperialism is not only their own population to accept their attacks, but also to try to move inside, penetrate inside the people here, to think that they have it's a psychological warfare.
Yes, without a doubt. What they do is that, first of all, the Persian language media apparatus in the West is huge. They spend billions of dollars every year. They have many TV channels, hundreds of TV channels, many websites, many Telegram channels. They have armies of trolls. For example, in Albania, there are 3,000 or 4,000 people who work there 24 hours a day. All of them have different accounts in Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and so on. They have the MEK, but they also have other troll farms. They have bots. They have so billions of dollars a year being paid to these people by Western taxpayers. And so there's a big psychological warfare against ordinary Iranians. On the other hand, their media is stronger than Iranian media. The Persian media in the West is much bigger than the Persian media inside Iran. And then you have the sanctions, so they try to strangle people, make them suffer as much as possible so that people would be miserable, and then out of desperation they would go to the streets. So in fact this shows that how strong the Islamic Republic of Iran is, that despite all the sanctions, despite all the propaganda, millions of people go to the streets in Tehran, and they're all from Tehran. Why? Because all the cities had their own demonstrations at the same time. So no one came from other cities. And in addition to that, many couldn't even make it to the protests against the riots because it was so crowded. When it was over and I was leaving, you saw tons of cars and people trying to get to the rally. And then imagine, people. It was a working day. It was not a weekend. It was not a weekend where everyone could go. So the numbers were amazing, and it shows that despite Western media propaganda and psychological warfare, despite the brutal and barbaric sanctions, which Western media, if they really cared about human rights, they would be protesting about the sanctions and about the Israeli and CIA and Mossad and the CIA and MI6 and French intelligence carrying out riots. But as we already discussed, Western media is fully compromised, and the only solution is for people to ignore Western media and to look to alternative media, not any alternative media, because much of the alternative media is now being bought by the Western oligarchs. But the alternative media that is independent, and people like yourself, you came to Iran by chance. You were here during the riots, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Well, we must open now the focus, because this is not a war with Iran. Iran is a turning point for the empire always to dominate Western Asia, to control all the region. In fact, to control various continents, because from here they control not only Western Asia, but also some way Africa, and some way is a threat to China and Russia. Now, Russia is in a step forward against empire, against NATO, against all Europe countries in Ukraine. At the same time, they are in a survival fight in common with China, because China knows that after Russia is coming the war, total war with them. But in this moment, I think they are sure that it's not only the BRICS, multipolar world. No, in this moment, the total war against China, Russia, and Iran is a survival war of all three. I think, is my opinion, that if Iran falls, Russia and China are lost. I think if China or Russia falls, all of three are lost. And then I answer myself. I ask myself. The three commandments, the three leaders, the three governments of these three countries. Maybe not the population, but the three governments of the three countries are coordinating defense, are coordinating. I expect that including commercial, but they are sure of this. Do you think they are so sure as to stop, definitely, the possible attack with everything to Iran?
First, we have to keep in mind that their antagonism and hatred for Iran began 47 years ago.
Yes, I know.
And so for 47 years, they've been telling people how evil Iran is. And And so many people in the West, they believe it because they were born hearing bad things about Iran. Whereas in reality, their hatred for Iran is for two things. One is that Iran is independent, and the Constitution stresses that independence. And it comes from our cultural, religious, traditional values, that we want to be independent. This is something that they hate. And the second, which they hate even more, is Iran's support for the oppressed.
Yeah.
It's in the Constitution, but it's also part of Iranian religious ideology. The Shia Muslims have a very strong belief in supporting the oppressed. You can go to history, for example, the story of Imam Hussein, his sister, his companions, his wife, his children. Their resistance against the evil of that time in support of the oppressed, and his martyrdom is something that is, on the day of Ashura, something that is very deeply embedded in Iranian society. Even very, 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 very secular people in Iran, when it comes to Ashura, they become religious that day.
Yes.
They celebrate, exactly. So it's there are many jokes about that, actually. But the point is that it is a part of Iran's, it's in the Constitution. And that's why after the revolution, Iran supported the anti-apartheid resistance in southern Africa. During the Shah, we supported the apartheid regime. We gave them and Israel oil. Most of their oil came from Iran, 90%. Iran immediately cut off ties. Then Iran supported Cuba. It supported later Venezuela, and it supported people from different religions, but those who were oppressed by the empire. In Bosnia, they were Sunni Muslims who were being wiped out in that war. In Venezuela, there are Catholics. In Cuba, the state is communist. In South Africa, all these different countries, different races, different religions, but Iran supported these, and of course Palestine.
Yeah.
And so this is something that is unforgivable for the empire. And this is why so much hatred is directed towards Iran. And this hatred goes back much further than Russia or China. Russia and China, they hate them now. But 10 years ago, you didn't hear these things about them. In the case of Iran, it's because of the fact that Iran, even under sanctions, wanted to remain independent and supported these oppressed nations. Now, I think the world, though, is changing very fast, and as you indirectly said or pointed out, Russia and China are targets too, and Russia and China are on the rise, and the West is on the decline. So 10 years ago, Iran was alone. 15 years ago, Iran was alone in supporting the axis of resistance, the Palestinian people. Even when Russia and China were not helping Venezuela or Cuba, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Iran helped them, even Nicaragua. So there was a lot of pressure on Iran. There's a lot of pressure now too, but the world is changing. So now you have Russia and China who have a bit different relationship with the West, and their relationship with Iran is growing very fast. Russia sooner, when the war, faster after the war in Ukraine, the relationship between Iran and Russia changed very quickly. And with China, it has always been improving over the years, but I think in the last 6-7 months it's been evolving even faster than before.
And only one question. In the China, always the people said, well, it's so big, so economy is so great that China could help more to Iran, for example. And at the same time, they say, well, Iran economy for China economy is so little that when helps Iran to China, then pays a great amount of money because of tariffs or the penalization for break the blockade with Iran. But I insist, China have in Iran the angular, piedra angular, the important inflection point. If they left Iran fall, there is a cancer inside the stomach of China and Russia, big cancer, impossible to refrain. If Iran is for the enemy, Russia and China can come with this.
Well, there are three things I should say. One is that Iran is not going to fall.
I'm sure too.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And two, even though many people have been born to, since their childhood they've been taught how bad Iran is the hope of the global South, more than any other country. Because Iran is the global South, and it is an independent country. And there are many other countries like Iran. And Iran is paying the price for its independence and for supporting the other countries and people who want independence. So you are correct that China, in China, they're still afraid of American sanctions. So their cooperation with Iran is not as extensive as many would like to see. The reason why Russia and Iran the relationship has changed so fast is because Russia has become completely sanctioned, so now they're not afraid to work with Iran. Before, Russia was also afraid to work with Iran. But so with Russia, Iran is doing trade, extensive cooperation. Neither side cares about the sanctions. In China, you still have that caution, but the situation is changing. But it's not just Russia and China. Iran is cooperating with many countries across the global South. Iran's success against the empire is a success for everyone. And any setback for Iran in the axis of resistance is a victory for the empire. And all I can say is that your viewers should put aside the decades of anti-Iranian propaganda, anti-resistance propaganda, and just always the first thing that should come to mind, or if they say why should we put aside all this propaganda that we've heard for decades, the first response that I would give is that the same people who are antagonizing Iran are the same people who've tried to help the Israeli regime justify the genocide in Gaza, who try to demonize the Palestinians as much as possible so that Zionism could get away with the biggest crime of the 21st century. And it is those Zionists today who've tried to create death and destruction in Iran. It's not Iran. So Western media tries to blame Iran, but the reality is that Western media is hiding the truth because they are part of the empire. The truth is that the Zionists came and tried to create chaos and have people slaughtered in the country. And just as Western media misinforms the public about Gaza, they misinform the public about Iran as well.
Yeah. And they use the same tactics against Venezuela, against Russia, against any enemy of demonization, and making these mythos of these countries to prepare the war inside and outside. In the focus of, I ensure the axis of resistance in this region is the axis between evil and humanity. This war, global war, is between barbarity and humanity. Barbarity, they call this the civilization and democracy, but it's not that. I ensure that, and I ensure that all the global war is connected. Then when some country is attacked, like Venezuela. It's a loss for all of us, including here, but only that I appreciate that the falling of Iran is not the same that the falling of Syria or the falling of countries in Nuestra America, in the Latin America, because this is something that will suffer a lot. We suffer maybe victories, maybe we celebrate victories or suffer defeats, but here is for me the turning point. We must preserve these victories of the three countries, and then the open window to win in the global war and the so-called South War, and the civilization that comes with Asia and with Africa in the future are the main point to preserve, to go ahead. Then, talking about Africa.
Just one point that I should point out is that the reality is this Western Empire, the US Empire, is not just the enemy of the Iranian people and the people across the global south. It is the enemy of people in Europe and North America. Ordinary people are increasingly suffering because of the oligarchs, because of the neocons and the Zionists who are inflicting injustice, suffering, murder, death, destruction on everyone. And I think that Trump is actually a symptom of a dying empire.
Yeah.
And his very strange behavior and his brutal behavior is not all that different from previous presidents. They too, Biden began the genocide in Gaza.
Obama has the record, man, of killings.
Yeah, he used drones to kill people. He destroyed Libya. He destroyed Syria. He helped the Saudis and the Emiratis carry out a genocide in Yemen against the Yemen, who's now the big supporter of the Palestinian people. But Trump's behavior, I think, and his demeanor and his language is reflective of this dying empire that has put aside the pretense of being civilized, that has put aside the pretense of caring about humanity and human rights. It is now just a brutal empire desperately trying to preserve power, not for their own people, but for the oligarchs.
Yeah, I am sure that we are talking about this state of this state for the Western country evils, but the people inside is also attacked by this, because it's in some way the cognitive dissonance that they have is like a prison of their minds to go ahead in this capitalism decline. Also, don't forget the capitalism decline. These systems are declining so fast that they are using now the war as they revitalize their moment to try to recolonize the rest of the world, to go ahead with this sensation of that capitalism is the best system, and this lie. 2 points more. We have Africa is the future, a young country, a young continent with some hope, with the Sahel, with for strengthen South Africa, with all these countries inside Africa are helped also by Iran, by China or Russia in some way. I don't know the relation with Iran and these countries now, but I know that they are some way helping the oppressed as it is. But at the same time, there is a country that imagine is inside the NATO. At the same time, is in reality part of the Asia. Is Turkey, and Turkey maybe is Turkey another not a turning point in so crucial, but it's crucial in this war now. What's the situation of the mind of Turkey? They want to revive a neo-Ottoman empire, and then in their mind is, well, if the victory is the West, then they give us like an Ottoman empire in a part. But if the victory is for the West, there is the Great Israel plan, and then they are not there in this plan. they are only to use because the European and Western countries look at Turkey with supremacism and you are nobody. It's like that. And then what do you think about this? Because in 2011 you said something about this prominent in relevance of the leaders in that time of Iran and Turkey. Now, it's 15 years ago was that maybe. What do you think about this position of Turkey and the relation with Africa?
Well, I think you have to separate Erdogan from Turkey.
Yeah.
Erdogan, I think he's in the Western camp. He does want to create his own mini empire, but he has, in my opinion, been very foolish. He destroyed Syria within the context of Obama's Operation Timber Sycamore, along with Jordan and these oil and gas-rich dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, especially Qatar. And he's helped the Israeli regime a great deal. During this genocide in Gaza, which is still ongoing, he's been transporting fuel to Israel nonstop. Half of the Israeli regime's fuel comes through Turkey, and he refused to stop this. The trade continues. He has political relations, and he's worked against the resistance. It was in coordination between him, Biden, and Netanyahu that Syria fell. Trump just recently, when he met Netanyahu, in front of Netanyahu, he said that what Erdogan did in Syria is a good thing, and he said that Netanyahu agrees, and Netanyahu was standing beside him.
And each time he calls him, he will be there.
Yes, in Egypt he said that. That was elsewhere. In Egypt, in front of Erdogan, and in front of all those people who gathered to celebrate Trump, it was a clown show. And it was a betrayal of the Palestinian people. What happened in Egypt, because all these leaders, including Erdogan, were basically whitewashing Trump's crimes in Egypt. But there, Trump said that Erdogan was always there whenever I needed him, and Erdogan put his hand on his chest to say, which you know what it means in our culture. But the people of Turkey are not like Erdogan. They are very sincere about the Palestinian people. But a lot of people in Turkey, they're influenced by Erdogan's media too. So Turkey has many different viewpoints. But what
there were rallies in favor of Iran now in Turkey.
Yes. I mean, the people of Turkey, actually, their culture, if you've visited both countries, you'll see that the culture of the two countries is very similar. Mm-hmm. Because Sufi Islam traditionally in Turkey was very strong, and Shia and Sunni Sufism are very similar to each other.
It's another question important for me because in Iraq, last time I was there in Karbala, and in Baghdad, in Karbala in the last year, I was invited by people of Shia, but we were visiting mosques of Shia and Sunni to demonstrate, to show us that they are joined together now more than ever in Shia and Sunni in Iraq.
In this hotel that you're in, you can walk from here to different churches. Yeah. There are churches on this street. Yeah. If you go out and to the left. And there are synagogues very near here. Yeah. Walking distance. This is very different from what the West is saying about Iran. But in any case, what Erdogan did, unfortunately, is that he aligned himself with Wahhabism and Salafism and these extremist ideologies, these takfiri ideologies, and he's had a negative impact on Turkish culture to a degree. But his destruction of Syria, I think, through it, he thought that he would be able to create a mini empire, beginning with Syria. But the reality is that with the fall of Syria, the Israelis want one thing and he wants something else. Who are the Americans going to support? Are they going to support Erdogan or are they going to support Netanyahu? It's obvious they're going to support Netanyahu. And Erdogan is in no position to stand up against the Israeli regime. If you recall, after the coup in Turkey, they arrested a pastor in Turkey, and they said that he was involved in the coup, and they put him on trial, and they sentenced him. And then Trump, in his first term, said, you have to release him, otherwise I punish you. And he threatened Turkey with sanctions, and Erdogan had to release him.
The pastor?
Yeah, the pastor. Now, whether the pastor was guilty or not, I have no idea. I mean, that's not something that I followed up closely. But the point is that he has made Turkey very vulnerable to the West, and now by destroying Syria, Syria was like a
stronghold.
A stronghold. Now there's no stronghold between Turkey and Israel, and that is why he's trying to tilt to Iran and to get help from Iran. But it's going to be difficult because Iran doesn't trust him. The bases, U.S. bases in Turkey, were used to help Israel, and U.S. planes fly over Turkey, military planes, and Turkey has worked against the resistance extensively. Even at the beginning of the genocidal war against Yemen in 2015, I think it was, Turkey and Qatar were supporting Saudi Arabia and the Emirates back then.
Yeah.
And then later on, when there were differences over Qatar and then the siege against Qatar, Turkey and Qatar turned away from Saudi and the Emirates. So Erdogan is not someone who you can trust, but Erdogan is not Turkey.
Okay. And Africa relationship with, better said, Iran relationship with Africa, real awakening, not the awakening of the colorful revolutions, but the awakening of Sahel, this strength.
Before I respond, I should just point out that also Erdogan has ambitions against Armenia, but Iran won't allow Armenian territory to be taken away from it. With regards to Africa, Iran has very strong relations. President Raisi, shortly before he passed away, traveled to 3 African countries. The potential of Africa is huge, but Africa was harmed more than any other continent by the empire. The conquistadors, when they went to Latin America and the Americas, and the Europeans, when they went to the Americas, they did enormous damage.
Yeah.
But what the empire did to Africa is unprecedented on this planet. And Africa is still suffering from that.
Yeah.
And even today, the West controls a lot in Africa.
Congo,
they have,
for example.
More than that, they control through the loans that they gave many decades ago to their despots. And African countries, they're paying back those loans. African countries, many of the mines in Africa are being exploited by the West without giving the people of Africa their rightful share. And the West is through countries like the Emirates and others, and through their own devices, they are creating civil wars and dirty wars in Africa. They're trying to divide countries in Africa like Somalia, because that's in Israel's interest too, or Sudan.
And what's in the agenda?
Yeah, so it's Yemen in the Arabian Peninsula, but also I think elsewhere. I think ultimately what the Americans and the Israeli wants is to break up Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and to have a world where no one can be strong against the empire, so that everyone is fighting each other, so that this weakening empire can survive. Because the weaker the empire becomes, the more dependent they become on divide and rule and having pit. And it's very interesting. One of the things that they also did in Iran and do in Iran is they try to divide the West through their intelligence agencies, through their media, through their agents. They try to create hatred between different ethnic groups, different sects in Iran. So in the West, they pretend they support multiculturalism and they've been saying that for decades. But in reality, what they try to do is they try to turn people against each other, have them kill each other across the region in the world. they are the hypocrisy of this empire. I think there's no comparison to it in human history. It is an evil empire, but the hypocrisy is really beyond belief.
Well, to finish this conversation for now, inshallah, you could come. I will be here 1 week more. There is some events that deserve. You can come and talk about this, and we keep in contact from, as always, from our country. But one minor question and one important and final question. The minor question is, some friend of mine, a comrade of anti-imperialism of Italy, told me, made you question to Marandi about something that he said about the problem with the foreign. You said something before, but the currencies. And after this, another people here told me we have some plan with like Petro not Petro the president, Petro the money, the money. The digital money and those things, to try some way to bridge over the inflection on and not only to go to another type of change to avoid the SWIFT, but also to accelerate the recuperation of the economy between this type of money that is digital money. I don't know if you know something about this.
Iran is working on that, but this is a process. It's not something that you can do overnight.
Yeah, no.
The world still depends a lot on the US dollar. Of course, the US dollar is on the decline. We see the rise of the price of gold and silver and other similar commodities. That's a sign of the decline of the dollar. And countries are increasingly moving away from the dollar, especially now that the United States is weaponizing the dollar increasingly, and U.S. and Western financial institutions are being used as weapons. People and countries are moving away, but it is not going to happen overnight. So the United States can still hurt Iran through sanctions. It can hurt Iran through weaponizing the dollar. But Iran is trying to use local currencies, blockchain technology, digital capabilities to circumvent these sanctions. And it is having an impact. Iran today the economy is growing. We had almost a decade of no growth at the height of the sanctions. During Trump's first term, especially, we had very little growth, if any, maybe zero growth. But now the country is growing, even though we have huge pressure and the empire is becoming more violent and vicious. And I think that in the months and years ahead, this is going to become more effective, these policies, because as we discussed earlier, Russia, China, and many other countries are now interested. Mm-hmm. A few years ago, it was just Iran. Mm-hmm. Russia wasn't interested. They weren't sanctioned. The United States wasn't targeting China yet. Now they also have a big incentive. And so do other countries too, because they're afraid that the United States will weaponize the dollar against them. They see, for example, in Latin America, they see what the United States has done to Venezuela. And Trump is saying that the oil is mine, the country is mine, everything is mine. Mm-hmm. Even I think many right-wingers in Latin America should be afraid. This is not about left and right. It is about the empire having full control. So I'm optimistic, but it will take time.
Yes, a cryptocurrency was an idea to oppose this in Venezuela with the petro currency, but as you said, it's something slowly, and it was not the immediate solution for the problem, the inflation there.
The important thing is that we have to remain vigilant. We have to make our voices heard. We have to continue resistance. and across the global south and among the ordinary people in the West, we must all work together to bring about change. It's only if this empire falls that people across the world would have an opportunity to have better lives, both in the West, but also across the entire global south.
Well, my final question is only your feeling about, we are in a website that we said Antiimperialistas.com, because we said that independence of your way of thinking about the structure of the society, how to reach this dignity with or without an Islamic republic or a atheist state or a social state or whatever. The important thing now is to join together against imperialism, and the axis of anti-imperialist countries must unite. So it's not time to gray. It's time to decide between evil and humanity. And I think it's not so difficult when you look straight to the problem. Do you think the people, the Iranian people, knows because they are suffering this as Iranians, as you said, 10, 15 years before, it's not the same relationship with these countries that are joined together now in these 5-6 months, including was on the speed up of this relationship. But the people of Iran is getting conscious of this situation in which there is a global war and it's an anti-imperialist axis that join together Palestinians, Hezbollah, Russia people, China people, Venezuela people, Korean people, and the people inside the countries that are suffering because the governments, the states are part of this empire.
Yes, I think the best solution to bring people across the world together is for us to move towards the decolonization of the mind. And we have to free ourselves from the intellectual chains that the empire has imposed upon us. The empire has taught us to hate each other, to look down at each other, so that we can all be divided and they can remain empowered. They want to see religious hatred. They want to see sectarian hatred. They want to see racial hatred. That's what they want. They speak of multiculturalism, but in reality, their actions are the exact opposite. But we have to understand that those things that they've tried to impose upon us intellectually, those are the biggest tools that they have against us. The colonization of land is unacceptable. The colonization of resources is unacceptable. But the colonization of the mind is the worst of all, because that enables them to carry out all the other types of colonization with our own complicity.
Perfect. We are in the communicational guerrilla to confront that. Thank you very much, Salam, for your help always. You are something that a reference for us in Iran and in the anti-imperialist war. Thank you.
Thank you.